I know and agree that passing screening rounds is a little bit like playing Russian roulette. Yet still, I could see a few scenarios where you would want to set yourself up for success for the final interview round, even before passing the phone screening round. And I actually do this quite often with many of the people I work with. Right. So in this video, I'm going to talk about what makes you more likely to pass these phone screening rounds. The first thing I like to talk about here would be referrals. Okay, so if you have referral, then that will work to help you to pass screening rounds, even with high-performing companies. Second thing, have a proper vision or focus preparing that phone screening round. And what do I mean by this? Well, if you're 2 days away from your interview, it makes no sense starting to prepare an entire story bank for the occasion, right? So maybe prepare a few key highlights, on which you'd want to sell yourself, ideally on your strength. Okay. Now, on the same topic, elevator pitch. They no longer ask you these questions for your elevator pitch these days, or at least not as much as they used to. So it makes little sense to over prepare on this thing. The third piece of advice is that in phone screening rounds, it's not important that you remember all the key details, that you would do a deep dive into some technicalities or some work experience which happened, a number of years ago. It's just important that you make a good impression, right? So to the extent you can put together a great show for a quick screening round, that's what works best. I'm talking about here versus the level of depth you should give to your interview prep. The third piece of advice here would be listen carefully to the question you're getting asked, because it's still quite common that people do not understand the question they're getting asked, or they assume they understood the question when in fact it's another question that gets asked. Even write it down if you feel like the question is a bit long, but ensure that you really do understand what they're asking you. And ideally, even listening skills, even what they're actually listening, why a question gets asked, is also another interesting approach and a highly efficient approach to interview. But long story short, listen carefully to the question get asked, and try not to be reactive in answering. Take your time, answer it as good as you can, and that's just the best approach, right? Next piece of advice: prepare specifically for the role that you are applying for, especially if you want to get up leveled, right? So, for example, I recently worked with someone going from a senior TPM to a principal TPM role. So the way we prepared for the phone screening round was to, hey, what would be the key differences between a senior and a principal TPM, right? And then we prepared exactly some stories. What would be the best key highlights to talk about when applying to get up level for a principal TPM role, right? When compared specifically to just a senior one. Okay, so this touches both on the behavioral side of things, but also on the technical side of the actuation. And it's, I coach behavioral interviews, but on the technical side, it basically goes the same way. You really want to showcase your experience, which makes sense for the role that you're targeting and for the company that you're applying for, right? Not for cultural fit. There's no such thing as hiring for cultural fit, but rather, for the scale, if you want, for the environment, their specific needs. There must be something, that caught your attention from your CV that would be interesting for them. So what I'm saying here is that prepare specifically for the role that you're applying for, because what some people do here is they prepare for their existing role that they have, right? So be a little bit more forward thinking if you have, right? And the final tip I have for you here when it comes to passing interviews, phone screening rounds, but any interview these days, especially with high-performing companies, is to give long, convincing first answers, right? So even if you'll find ChatGPT or someone else advising you, get to the point. It's perfectly fine, to get to the point, but still have a longer and convincing first answer, right? And if the interviewer will not have time to listen to your answer, they will simply cut you short, right? But if they cut you short, doesn't mean you lose the interview. It means that maybe, they're clear that they want to work with you, right? Or they have other questions to ask you as well. They have to screen you on some other stuff as well. But oftentimes people feel challenged of coming up with long, convincing answers because it's really hard to make sense, to make sense at length, right? So still have that clarity of thought and be concise if you want, right? Still, right? So this would be my top tips to pass phone screening rounds in 2024. I hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.